you good?
Yeah, no problem.
My pen? Are we ready to... How are we doing? Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome. I have a motion moved by Jonathan Weeb, seconded by Karen Terziano. Be it resolved, the regular council meeting agenda dated Monday, March 25th, 2019, be adopted as printed and circulated. All those in favor? It's carried. Any disclosures of a conflict of interest? Councillor Withy.
Thank you, Worship. Item 8.2.6, I have a conflict for business reasons.
Okay, that's been noted. Thank you. Any others? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we will march right into the next part of our agenda, which is the invited and ceremonial presentations. And the first one we have this evening is a very special one. They're all special, don't get me wrong, but this one's particularly special. As many people will know, Deb Kerwin served as the chair of our Accessibility Advisory Committee for many, many, many years, and that really just is the tip of the iceberg of all the amazing things she's done in our community. I think I personally have always been a bit in awe at Deb. I think from the very first moment I met Deb 15 years ago, I knew that she was going to be a force to be reckoned with in this community, and she most certainly has been. I think that in many ways, not only has she changed the attitudes and ideas about accessibility and the importance of accessibility in this community, but she's been a transformative voice on the issue of accessibility across Ontario. I personally will never forget, I have to tell you this story, I never forget my first real education on the issue of accessibility. Deb and Ross were very eager to participate in one of the many fundraisers I was helping to organize for the Chrysalis Women's Shelter and transitional housing. So Deb called to ask me if the venue we had chosen was accessible, and it was, of course, the first time I'd ever considered such a notion. I hadn't thought about that before. But I quickly said I will go and check it out and, you know, do my research and find out. So I promptly went up there to the venue, and the very helpful staff kind of walked me through what they could do to make it accessible. And I felt the pit in my stomach get bigger and bigger. They described this sort of process of getting in at the kitchen loading dock, and you'd sort of wheel past the ovens, through the little service bar they had there, and then into the upper level of the dining room. And then, of course, there was also one accessible washroom, which was down a maze of hallways in one of the guest rooms. And I immediately thought, oh, this is horrible. I mean, I couldn't believe I thought it was undignified, the process that Deb was going to have to go through. And I was really dreading the phone call that I was going to have to make. And so I called Deb, and I explained all that to her, and I told her that I didn't know what to say. And Deb was not upset for 1 second. She didn't cancel. She didn't demand that we change the venue. She sympathized with how I felt, actually, a little bit, and said, I understand how you feel. And I'm sorry you feel that way. But I'm also a little glad you feel that way, because you have an inkling now of what it feels like for people with mobility issues and other disabilities every single day of their life. And I thought, what a powerful way to teach somebody and change their thinking. And it was a message that I'll never forget as long as I live, and it certainly changed me forever. The total sum of the work that Deb Kerwin has done would be tough to quantify. Not just in Ontario, not just in Huntsville, but literally all over Ontario. And I know that Deb will often dwell on the things that haven't been accomplished yet, and the and the work's still to be done, because there is still work to be done. But on a day like today, I want you to know that I do, council, and certainly all of Huntsville, celebrate the tremendous progress that you have brought to Huntsville. You've put us on the map in terms of accessibility, and we've all grown tremendously. But the progress you've created in transforming the hearts and minds of people literally all over our province as well. And so to thank you for all those years of work, and to entice you to just not completely go away and keep helping us, you'll remember that Council passed a new policy where we take the flag from the clock tower down every month. We replace it every month so we can make sure that it is never tattered. But we save every flag now, it's just like they do in Parliament Hill, so that we can honor citizens and people that we think are important and deserve to be honored. And so the very first one we gave away was to retiring Councillor Schumacher. And so I'm really quite proud today to give out the first one to a citizen of Huntsville on behalf of all of Council to our friend Deb Kerwin. So Deb, I'm going to come up there and get my picture taken with you and give you this wonderful. I also have a book for you, and we're also going to give you the opportunity to say a few words. So.
On? Okay. Yes, I was going to ask if I could have a word or two.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I wrote it down. As AAC chair, it has provided me with a multitude of opportunities to promote accessibility in and beyond Huntsville. Back in 2006, when Huntsville first held the Ontario Winter Parasport Games, the town was recognized for its accessibility initiatives. At that time, the initiative that stood out was the Yellow Ramp program, and was instrumental in securing the Main Street Accessibility Award for the town of Huntsville. The Accessibility Directorate of Ontario continued to monitor the progress of accessibility in our town and has put Huntsville on the provincial map as a hotspot for accessibility. I have made many a presentation throughout the province on how our ACC has been so successful. I believe the icing on the cake was the relationship that the AAC developed with council and staff, albeit it was a challenge with each new council and the high turnover of the Director of Public Works. I want to thank this council and the four preceding councils, and staff who have come and gone, and to those who hung in to work with us. Together, we have made Huntsville a better place to live.
Here, here.
Thank you.
Now, normally when we give presentations, and I don't give everybody else an opportunity to have a few words, but if anybody else would like to say anything to Deb, or you're welcome to take an opportunity. Okay. She doesn't want to hear from you, apparently. She's leaving. That's great. Okay. Yeah, she's heard enough. Okay. Okay, thanks for that, everyone. The next item on our agenda tonight is a presentation on the community engagement that we've just started. And Lisa Spollock's going to walk us through that process and how that's working.
Okay, I think that's on. Can you hear me? All right, wonderful. Excellent. Okay, so thank you very much, Council, Your Worship. So I'm here today to present Huntsville's new community engagement website, myhuntsville.ca. I'm going to present today a little bit of a demo. I'm going to show you how it works and dive into 2 projects that we currently have on the website. But before I do, I thought I'd take a minute to quickly touch on the municipality's current engagement activities and why we're so excited about myhuntsville.ca. So currently, as Council knows, when we want to receive feedback from the public, we do open houses or public meetings. And these in-person sessions are really great and very important because it allows residents that one-on-one contact. However, not all residents can make it out necessarily to the public meetings, and it's not necessarily accessible. So we're very excited about an opportunity to provide an online way, a website that's available 24/7. It's easily accessible and it's mobile responsive. So essentially, from the comfort of your living room, from your dock, as long as you have internet access, you can go on myhuntsville.ca and provide input on projects that matter to you. So I'll give you a little bit of a rundown of the site. Okay, so to get to the site, you can enter myhuntsville.ca in the web browser, or you can visit our government website, and there's a quick link on our homepage. When you enter it in, you'll get to our homepage, and this is where all the action takes place. So this is where, when staff enter a project page, or enter information about a certain project or topic, this is where it'll appear. And this homepage will be constantly changing as we have new initiatives, new topics, and new projects that we want consultation on. It's important to note that the projects on this page, they're one of two projects. They're either open for consultation or informative. And the reason behind that is not all topics are at a stage for public engagement. So it could just be the stage of the project, or potentially we're providing more information about a community topic that's important. All residents can access myhuntsville.ca at any time, and they can view the current topics, they can dive in, learn more about it, and see what other people are saying and how they're engaging in that particular project. However, if you want to participate and provide your input, you'll need to register. So it's really important. It's up here on the right, in the right top corner of the website. You can see the register button. You can click that. And what we're asking is really quick. It's very easy. Your first name, your last name, your postal code, and your age. You get to create a username and manage your password, and then you're able to participate in all of our surveys and everything that the site has to offer. And this is a really great way. Not only it provides us details in case that we need to connect with you and to follow up on certain projects with you. So after you register, you can start engaging on the site. And one of the exciting things that we're very proud of is that staff have the ability to continually update those projects, answer questions, and report back on how the public input has contributed to the discussions and the decisions being made. So ideally, we're closing the loop as the project moves forward in the lifespan, whether it's a phase of the project or the project is completed. So I can dive in here to two different projects. So the first one we're going to have a quick look at here is the municipal accommodation tax. And this is an example of a project that is currently informative. It provides all the background information you could want. So if you've heard about the municipal accommodation tax and you're a resident and you want to find out more information, this is the perfect place to go. It has all the background, all the information, and you can see on the right-hand side of the project page, we have a stay informed, so sign up. We have the staff member who's listening and answering questions in the direct contact, as well as a document library of all the reports and additional information you can access, FAQs. And at the bottom of the site here, we have question and answers. And you can see now we currently had a resident ask a question, and we promptly answered with the response. All public so that other people can learn from those answers as well. So the next, I'm going back to the homepage here. The next project that I'd like to highlight is how to help shape our 2019 strategic plan. And this is a current project that is open for consultation. We want to hear feedback from our community about it. If you're not sure what a strategic plan is and residents want to find out more, this is, again, where you'd find all the information. It has links to our current strategic plan, which will give you all the details. It talks about why we're reaching out and how we want your feedback. And you can see, too, that has a staff member and any links on the side, as well as a life cycle. Currently, we're accepting information. We want feedback. As this moves forward in the different life cycle phases, it'll show where we are, whether we're reporting or maybe we've finished it and the final report's there for you to have a look at. So you can see here at the bottom of the page, we have 3 different engagement tools that we're utilizing here to gather feedback from the community. Strategic Plan Survey is one of them. Again, it's going to ask you to register. We want you to register in order to participate, and that's really just so we can keep you updated with the progress of the project. You can kind of have a look at the different questions that are there. And then we have a Share Your Ideas tool. And this is a really wonderful tool for residents to provide information. Maybe they don't want to take the survey, but it's important for them to share their vision for Huntsville. So for this particular project, we want to know what we can do today to ensure that Huntsville's a vibrant place to live, work, and play in future generations. So you can see here there's 3 public comments. One's about ATVs to access downtown. We have water fountains for humans and dogs. And then one's a comment on the strategic plan. So it's really quite interesting because as we get more ideas in here, you can see that there's room to comment. So other registered users can comment and say, hey, I really love that idea. I'm going to like it. I'm going to provide, have you thought about this aspect of this idea? And you can really see how the engagement starts to ramp up. And we're always checking out the pages. We're always engaged in this, and we can provide feedback too. And the beauty of this is this all gets consolidated as we move on to the next phase of the project. So you really do have your say, and you can provide your input, and we will take it into consideration as the discussions move forward. So I'll go back to the home page here. So we launched about 2 weeks ago, and the site has had over 500 visits so far, unique visits, which is excellent. And we have about 53 registered users at this point. And we're really looking forward to watching this site grow because 53 people is a lot of people that are going to engage, and we hope to grow that database. The more participants we have, the more registered users, the greater our ability is to connect with a wider audience. Because we can use that database in future and say, hey, 2 months from now, have you checked out the new projects on here? Are you interested in providing feedback? So that's quite wonderful. So I think that's the quick demo of the site. I hope that everyone will go on and have a look and engage with myhuntsville.ca. It's a great way to get involved in municipal business and community topics. And it's really easy to register. So that wraps up my quick demo.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Weep.
Thank you, Mayor Richardson. I just want to comment on what a great idea I think this is. I think this takes the randomness and maybe thoughtlessness out of the social media threads and channels them into a place where we can use it and really engage in a meaningful way. So I like the idea, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more from it. A quick question would be, how else are we advertising to our public to find this?
Absolutely, through you, Your Worship. We have communication and marketing efforts, so any projects that is listed on this engagement site will have backup through our huntsville.ca website. We'll do media releases, social media, and campaigns for various, depending on the nature of the engagement opportunity.
Councillor Emmer?
Thank you, Worship, through you. Great presentation, thanks very much. I'm curious in the aspect of when there's a project taking place and someone asks a question, is there a time frame for getting back to that person?
Yeah, absolutely, through you, Your Worship. We generally have a rule, we try to get back as soon as possible, but obviously if the questions come in, it's 24/7. So if they come in at 2 in the morning, we try to get back within 2 to 3 business days. The site currently has moderation as well, so it's something to consider that if there's public comments and they breach the online terms of use, if they're negative, not negative, but inappropriate, then there's a process in place to make sure that, we can address that.
Councillor Whitty?
Thank you, Your Worship. Quick question. Can people register more than once, and is there protection against things like bots and stuff in this thing?
I believe so, yeah. I'd have to look into that a little bit further on the details, but I believe it's 1 register per person. Yeah.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Terziano and then Councillor Thompson. Sorry, I'm actually registering. I was a little distracted. I'm very excited about it.
Thank you, Your Worship. Lisa, when somebody registers and asks a question, do they get a direct answer, or is the answer just posted on the website?
Through you, Your Worship, there's various ways to do that, but I believe it goes directly to the staff member, and the staff member provides a response, and then it is public. So there's a kind of a 2-step way of doing that.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you again, Lisa, for the presentation. Very good. Lisa, I see 6 panels here on the homepage. Are there going to be more, or will that be added to or change?
Yep, as we launched with these 6 panels and the 5 projects, ideally we're utilizing this tool constantly. So as projects come up, we can actually move them into an archive situation once they're done and complete. And this will that homepage will always be changing. So hopefully we could have as many as we wanted to on that homepage.
So they will be archived, though?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. You can always, if it's been on the site, we will keep it archived, and residents will always be able to access past information.
Perfect. Thank you. I love it.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Lisa.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, our next presentation is from Teresa Oliver, representing Craig Developments. Come on down, Teresa. You need to use this screen too, don't you?
Oh, okay. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Denise, I didn't know if you wanted to talk first or if you want me to do this piece first and then you talk about the agreement. Okay. It's very short and very sweet. Essentially, we've put in the permits for the Phase 1 townhouses, which I'm kind of pleased about. Woohoo. having some real traction. But this is just to give you an update on how much work has already been done, even though we're still obviously doing a lot of planning. But the work that's been completed is environmental phase 1 for the property. The geotechnical is complete. The topographical survey in this particular property's topographical was essentially very challenging because there is obviously a watercourse, which was a nice surprise for everybody. All the initial servicing investigations and flow calculations with the district and the district's engineers are complete. We've done the site line clearing, that was mostly for topographical and for geotechnical work that had to be done. The first round plan discussions with council members, most of you were there for that, that's all been done. The architectural site plan at this point is now hopefully complete and there's no more moving parts to that. All of the structural engineers and permit drawings and engineering drawings are all complete and now submitted for permit for the first 8 townhouses. The justification report for the zoning, which hopefully will be presented to council for your next meeting in April, is complete. And the IAHE applications for the first 8 townhouses, complete. And 2 public meetings are complete. We've gone through the process twice. We've had, actually, the first one, we didn't have a lot of people. I think it was just mostly bad weather. The second one had way more people because we had a direct mail assistance from the town. So thank you, Kirsten, for that, if Kirsten's here. So we've had a lot of positive feedback. And for the first time, I'm going to admit, I'm kind of astounded. I've never done a project where I haven't had a lynch mob. This was the first non-lynch mob problem or project I've ever had. So, and I think that's to the credit of the council and all the work that you've done, preparing the public for this coming project and all the input that's been put in. So I want to just extend a large thank you to all of you for helping us, actually. Like I say, I've never had so much positive feedback on a project. And I think it also goes to show the willingness of the community to show that this project was really, really needed. So we had some good questions, but generally all of the responses have been really good. And the work that's still underway, there's still going to be a substantial amount of work for the functional servicing for all the apartment buildings that are still coming in. We have to do an updated environmental impact study, but that's time sensitive because it can only be done in the summer. The build permit for the first townhouses has been submitted, and hopefully that'll get turned around fairly quickly so we can start getting a spade in the ground and some foundations. The connect permits for the district for townhouses, that is actually now complete. That was complete today. I did that today, and I've submitted that to the town. We need to update the registered agreement with the town of Huntsville, which is what you're here tonight to talk about. Some changes in that, some portions that we will have to consider with the ministry, with the wetway. Having said that, in 2008, when the planners' subdivisions with the townhouses was registered, the Riverstone had some mitigating options, and we'll possibly more than likely just employ the same mitigating options. Worst case, we may end up going to the ministry for a permit, and that potentially will just have an 8-month impact. But we'll put that in the plan, and we'll update council if and when that happens. But just so that council's up to speed with what that may mean. The severance registration for the consent portion of the 8 townhouses, the draft severance was already submitted with the permits, and registration is pretty much very close to being done at this point. So E.J. Williams is in the process of completing that. So in terms of planning and getting everything ready to start making holes in the ground, we've done a substantial amount of work in lightning time. A lot of this work, everybody pulled together to get this done way faster than it would typically take. Geotechnicals usually take way more time than they did. C.C. Tatham jumped from one project and jumped straight into this to help us speed up with all the flow calculations. The town has been amazing with helping us speed up many of the processes, Denise included with helping me get through the amendments that we may need to this. So really, very big thank you to everybody who's been a part of this project to this point. So initially, in our previous update, I had explained that we're doing this in 3 phases, the blue phases being 1A, B, and C, the red phase being phase 2, and the yellow or green in the picture is phase 3. Our initial previous density plan was 180 units with phase 3, the red portion, or 2, I should say, being 74 apartments, and phase 3, 106. And after our last meeting with council, it was suggested, and I think it's by Nancy, that what if we had not, the town council had not imposed the density, and we were suggesting our own density. We went back to the drawing board and did some changes just to get the parkings closer to one parking per unit, and we achieved that by changing the density to now this density plan. Essentially, it's exactly the same site plan, but we've incorporated more one-bedroom units, which is the high-demand unit in Huntsville, and we've taken out some of the bachelors. So the site plan from a bird's eye view actually looks the same, but we had to redesign each of the buildings because we had to relay all the floor plans. So there was a huge amount of work involved with that. The architects had to do it in record time for us to get it back to you so we could get these approvals done as fast as we could. So the new density now in the previous density zone 2, which is the red units, used to be 74 apartments. We've reduced that to 63. And zone 3, which is now the biggest change, we've reduced from 106 apartments to 84. In terms of unit breakdown, that'll be affordable versus market, we've kept it at 41%. Phase 1 will be 42%, and phase 2 and 3 will be exactly 40% at our minimum target. The total number of units now, including the townhouses, where it used to be 210, is now reduced to 171. So that's actually a significant drop. It's about a 20% drop, if not a little bit more, in our unit count. In terms of parking ratios, and this is, of course, why we did this big rethink on this, was because we were originally asking for a parking ratio for the apartments of 0.59 parkings per unit. And that was one of the sort of hard stops for most people to go, well, maybe that's too little. And, we had to admit that that kind of was a very strong point of view, and it did make sense. It was a good point of view. We have now, with this revamped model, got to, with the apartments, one parking per ratio. But if you include the townhouses as well, we're above one parking per unit. We're at 1.14. So now we've got to one parking, and remembering that most of these units will be for seniors and for community living, and those people won't have cars, so there will be ample parking for visitors or day visitors. So I think at this point we've got to a place where we feel comfortable with this density before we were working with the density that had been imposed by the agreement. And so I appreciate that council was open to that amendment, and that's one of the amendments that Denise will be going through tonight. In terms of variations or variances, the zoning 3, there's no change. There is already an allowance for that small exception for what is the R3, but in the R4 zoning, there are some updates. I'm just going to make some notes. There's some handwritten notes to this piece of work. We're only requiring an exception for what is the lot area minimum, because we're obviously still going above the units required for the density, but we're going to have a bonusing agreement, but we're not very much over. Before we were like 20% over, we're way closer to that line now. The front yard minimum, you can ignore that because we are going to combine building 1 and 2 together in one front yard line, and building 3, 4, and 5 will be one. So that actually doesn't apply anymore. The only one that may still apply is the rear yard setback. For units, buildings 4 and 5, the bylaw requires 10 meters, and we've got 9 meters and 9.1 meters. And, we feel that that's so close that it's an acceptable request for a variance. So the variances we will be asking for will be the density and potentially these 2 small backyard distances from 10 meters. Other than the parking, of course, the parking at one parking per apartment. So really, we've tried to get as close to what we realistically think is acceptable for the zoning. So the zoning, we've simplified this zoning application hopefully a lot, and the justification report has now nicely covered off all of these little components. And that's just, again, referring to the parking. There may be some questions about the buffering, and that'll be covered off again with Kirsten. I don't think there are too many, but there'll be a few where the 1.5 landscaped area won't be available. Any questions?
We'll start with Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wonder if you could go back to panel 1.
Oh, sure.
Unfortunately, it's not on the screen anymore, but it had to do with the phase 1. You've already completed phase 1 for the environmental, phase 1 for...
Phase 1 environmental's done.
To be done, and I can't remember, oh, there it is there.
Yeah.
The updated environmental impact study. Now, is that phase 2 or is that something different?
No, it's a completely different thing. So environmental phase 1 is really to check if there's chemicals or petrochemicals or any dry cleaning products on the site. It's a chemical check. Whereas the environmental impact study is to see what our live species are on this. So one's dealing with live species and animals that are on the site, which is an environmental impact study. But the environmental, which has to be registered with the ministry, is to say that the property is clean of chemicals. So the two, actually, they sound similar, but they're actually two completely different issues.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This property, incidentally, normally if there is any sort of environmental chemical concern, you have to do a phase 2, but this property had none, so they said it wasn't required.
Okay. Nice.
Councillor Weave.
Thank you, Your Worship. Teresa, so any development like this, space is at a premium. Do you find the current layout adequate for snow removal in the winter?
We only have cover 18% of the GFA, and we're allowed up to 30%. So we're actually about 12% under even the requirement. We've got a lot of green space in this place, so tons. And one of the other design components that we're now also covering off in Highview is we're not putting any curb stops because you need to get the snow over the curb stops, and we're finding the snow plows, as soon as they have curb stops, they can't get the snow over the curb. So we're rethinking some of the design elements that were typically used more down south. So big impact. But the GFA on here is very low in comparison to what would be allowed with the bylaw.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Withy.
Thank you, Worship. I'm looking at the proposed amendments here, and the dates are being pushed out quite a ways.
Yes.
But I also noticed that the ones that are being pushed out the furthest are probably the attainable ones.
No, they're all a mix. So they're all market and attainable.
But in the first phase, the townhouse, there's very few, comparatively speaking, than the last.
No,
phase.
there's 40%. So 40% in the townhouse, 42% in the townhouses, 40% in all of the buildings.
Is that? I must have missed that on that
Oh,
chart.
yeah, sure. Let me go back to that if I can for a second.
Well, no, I think, I believe you.
Oh, okay, no problem. No, it's all a mix, so it'll still be the same mix. The only component that we're being concerned or being careful about is the environmental impact study. If there are species at risk, and one of them would be there's a snake, I think it's a hognose snake, and the blunting or the blanding turtle. Forgive me if I get those wrong, but I think that those are the species. But the reason why we're being cautious, the reason why we're being cautious is if the ministry says they want some things put in place for that, they may delay the process. So we're just being very cautious to
So that's the
give us room to make for.
That's the 2028, because it's gone from like 2021 to 2028. That's 7 years.
Those original timelines were completely unrealistic. They were never going to be attainable because they didn't take into account that we've got to get through the condo application with the district, and then we've got to get all the servicing and the surfacing agreements with the district. So that was a function of somebody who just didn't have enough experience understanding that those were the realistic timelines with the infrastructure. It's not the actual building that's the issue. It's getting the infrastructure in the ground, working with the district, working with their flow calculations, and including with this particular project, there may have to be an upgrade to one of the water services. So we may have to put in a pump station, and we have to work with the district to make that timing work.
Geez, a lot about the district. We know a few people that might have some.
Yeah, so, and it's the district is only doing its best due diligence. It's just that the original people who put the original proposal in hadn't really had those questions with the district. They put an idea in, but they hadn't really worked in real terms with the on-the-ground infrastructure installation here.
Thank you.
Councillor Emmer.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Through the parking ratio, was accessibility included in that parking
Absolutely.
ratio?
Yeah, whether we like it or not, the architects and the bylaw requires that we have a certain ratio of parkings that are accessible and where they're located, and all of these buildings will be fully accessible, except for the townhouses, which are walk-up.
Deputy Mayor Terziano.
Thank you, Your Worship. Further to the dates where this has been pushed out, and my first question was going to be, were they unrealistic to start with, or were they dollars and cents? Which you answered that, but the dates are, like, will have to be done by. You could end up moving some of this stuff up quicker if things go well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We would love to do this as fast as possible. We're just being cautious and timing this with what we're going to get done with the district. So in my exercise and how I work with business, I'm incredibly prudent. I'm usually too conservative. So I've often been accused of, because I'm in this business, that I'm too cautious and I don't just make promises. I'm not a good salesperson. I'm an engineer by trade or by thinking. So I tend to be cautious, and I always put that into my plans because I hate to overpromise and underdeliver. So unfortunately, if I'm going to put my name to this and it's my reputation, I would rather not make a mess of it. And that's just, unfortunately, how I hope that everybody understands why I'm doing that.
And one further.
Go ahead.
And is the phase 2, like, will phase 1 be completely wrapped up before you start phase 2, or can they overlap each of these?
We have some things that we're going to have to iron out with the environmental impact study first before I'll be able to answer that. So I have to wait till summer until we know what that impact may be. So how the environmental impact study works is when they do their initial desktop environmental impact, they will say, in this particular type of neighborhood, there may be these types of species. And they do a theoretical impact studies saying, well, you know, it's typical in this type of habitat, you may have these type of species. So when Riverstone did its original study, it said, well, these types of species may exist in this type of habitat, but they don't know for sure, and they can only check that in summer. So they may get there in summer, and yes, some of these species that they're thinking may be impact species are there, or they may not be there. But they can't know until summer, until they've done the work. I won't have more information. So I'm just going to sit on that until summer. And where those locations may be may impact at least one row of the townhouses. So if that happens, then we will try and leapfrog and do parts of the red buildings, start on the red buildings, move around to the yellow buildings, and have to get through the ministry process there. So if we run into that, I'll come, and we've allowed some flexibility in the agreement. If that happens and it's outside of our control, that we can jiggle around a little bit and get another phase started and try and make up the time on something else. So, and unfortunately, some of those items will be out of our control because they simply can't check for those species in winter.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, great. Thanks, Teresa.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, I'll read this resolution first. We'll move into reports from municipal officers. So the motion I have is moved by Dan Armour, seconded by Jason Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that council approves in principle the proposed amendments to the attainable housing agreements with Craig Development, Inc., as outlined on Schedule B of Report CIO 2019-3. And further, that staff be directed to work with legal counsel to implement the proposed changes while satisfying that the requisite level of attainable housing will still be delivered. And for that any legal costs incurred as a result of amending the agreement be borne by the developer. And for the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign any necessary documentation. Would you like to highlight your report?
Thank you, Worship. So the report is very detailed, but for the benefit of our viewers, I'll just recap what is included in the report. As council's aware, we did enter into an agreement with Craig Developments late last year. And since that time, the proprietor has changed, and that is Teresa Oliver, who is now overseeing that company. The biggest changes are, in fact, the phase development. So the previous agreement spoke to 3 phases, 70 units in each phase, with a requirement of 40 to 60% being attainable housing. So what's before you today by the new proprietor is a breakdown of the allocations of the housing, which were outlined by Ms. Oliver earlier today. That is the crux of what the amendments pertain to, and then we're just changing also some of the wording just to accommodate some unforeseen changes. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Are there any questions? Deputy Mayor Terziano.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I guess through you to our CAO, I would just ask that if you are reasonably comfortable and through any conversations with our legal departments, that these changes aren't going to pose any problems for us.
Your Worship. So some of those conversations are solicitor-client privilege, so if we wanted to go into great detail, we'd have to go into closed session. What I can advise you is that the majority of the requests that the proponent has brought forward, our legal counsel has advised that it would be at the discretion of counsel if they're willing to amend the agreement. But there are some words of caution that obviously our legal counsel would speak with me about, and if there was any need to have further discussions with counsel on that, I'd bring it forward. But to go into great detail at this point in time, we'd have to go into closed session.
Councillor Weeb?
Thank you, Your Worship. Denise, I'm actually not sure if this is a question for you or for Teresa, but the dates that in the amendments that have been pushed farther into the future to 2028, there's still a requirement to maintain a percentage of them as affordable housing. Do we know, or have we received any advice on if the definition of affordable housing would change, or that how we would maintain that that far into the future, they would still fall under the definition of attainable?
Your Worship, as part of the agreement, I couldn't state offhand what section it is, but it does talk about affordable housing or attainable housing. The definition of that is as per our housing authority, which is the District of Muskoka. So there is a definition that governs what attainable or affordable housing would be, and that we would maintain that through the entire agreement.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Do I need to read the resolution again, or can I call the question? All those in favor? That's carried. Okay. Move on to council minutes. Moved by Karen Terziano, seconded by Jonathan Weeb. Be it resolved, the following council meeting minutes be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. February the 25th, 2019, that's a regular meeting, and March 18th, 2019, special council meeting. Any questions about those minutes? All those in favor? That's carried. Okay, reports from municipal officers. Huntsville Public Library Board, Councillor Thompson from February the 6th. Anything to highlight for us there?
It was an opportunity to name our new chair and vice chair, and our new chair is the same chair as we had before, and that would be Sue Dixon, and our vice chair once again is David Purchase, and of course to meet our new members of the board. And I just want you to know that we have some real keeners. I think we all saw the CVs of those that applied for the library board, and I just want you to know that this is a very, very astute group of people, and very keen about the library, and with a lot of experience actually in library functions from other municipalities and so on and so forth. So I think we're in for a really, really exciting 4 years with the library board. So yeah.
Any questions of Councillor Thompson? Okay, great. Thank you for that. Aspen Community Hall Ad Hoc Committee, March 13th. Councillor Schumacher, anything to highlight?
Well, I did not attend the meeting on March 13th as I had a prior training commitment with the Community Living Huntsville. So previous Councillor Det Schumacher was called out of retirement to attend that meeting. Elections were to have been held last November, and they weren't able to happen at that time, which would have been one of his last duties as councillor. So he did step up to the plate and do his duty as to facilitate the elections. And the same people were elected into the same positions. So we have Cheryl Domain as president, and vice president is Ross Earl, secretary Thelma Baudry, and treasurer Irene Turner. And if there are any other questions, you can ask.
Great. Any questions? Councillor Amber.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick one. I noticed there was some objection to the roof over the ramp area. I'm just wondering, has that been brought forward to Kerry at all? And
Kerry? Director Lamb.
Thank you, Your Worship. It seems there is a bit of difference of opinion related to the ramp. The motion that staff have received from the Hall Committee is that they financially would support moving forward with the ramp.
Okay. Any other
Yes,
questions?
yes, I would second that. I think a lot of it mostly too has to do with, they don't want people to have to hurt their backs shoveling the ramp, so the roof is a necessary thing.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, stuff. Moving on to Committee of Adjustment. Councillor Fitzgerald, as Vice Chair, did you have anything that was particularly salient to share with Council?
There was not a lot of excitement at that meeting. Run-of-the-mill applications that were approved. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Councillor Withy has one.
I disagree, Councillor Fitzgerald, because apparently on page 5, at 5.5, Chair Stone made an appearance.
That's not the case.
Well, it says so in the minutes. Just a minor minute correction for you.
Perfect.
Chair Stone was away, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay.
Not according to the minutes.
Okay.
He showed up.
So they should be corrected.
I'll be sure to pass that along.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Just proving that I actually read your minutes.
All right. BIA Board of Management, Deputy Mayor Terziano.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's not a lot in that set of minutes. Not to say that the BIA isn't ramping up for another very busy year, but for those who haven't heard, the BIA did hire a new BIA manager, and that is Morgan Richter. And Morgan was one of the people who filled in for Helena when she took her leave for the election period. So she had about 4 months' experience, and she's been holding the fort down while we went through interviews. And anyways, I think she's going to be just a great permanent addition to the BIA. So other than that, I think we're just getting ready for a busy summer.
Okay, great. Any questions of the Deputy Mayor? Okay, we'll move on to the Huntsville Lake-based Chamber of Commerce update. Councillor Weeb.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing too exciting, but we did talk about the Chamber taking on a strategic visioning exercise. Essentially, we're very familiar with that around this table, but it's been a long time coming for the Chamber to reassess and reevaluate where we are and where we want to go in the future. So it's early talks, and we've kind of just started on that, but we're going to be setting aside some time to really dig in and brainstorm as to what we want to see come from the Chamber in the future months and years. So that'll be more to come, but I'll update at that time, but I'm pretty excited about that.
Okay, any questions of Councillor Weeb? Okay, we'll move into our committee minutes. A motion moved by Brian Thompson, seconded by Jonathan Weeb. Be it resolved that the Operations and Protective Services Committee meeting minutes dated February 27th, 2019, and the recommendations contained therein be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. Councillor Thompson, anything to highlight from that committee?
Thank you. Hang on there we go. Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, we had actually had a relatively short meeting. We didn't have a lot of information to pass along, but we did congratulate Brad Polishchuk, who is now completed at least the Association of Ontario Road Supervisors Public Works Leadership Development Program. So Brad is one of our stars at Public Works type of thing. Gary Monahan presented us with some fire statistics from 2018, some pretty startling information there, and that's Schedule A. So if you look those over, you'll see that they had 505 emergency incidents in the year of 2018, which seems like a lot. 37 fire events. Those involved structure fires and chimney fires, vehicle fires, grass and bush fires, that kind of things. Rescue calls, which involved elevators, I guess people stuck in elevators somewhere. On water, of course, motor vehicle crashes, which would be probably the most prevalent ones, and one by rope. And I don't think we got an explanation of exactly what that one was. Maybe Director Hernan would, if anyone wants to know what the senior officer calls are all about, maybe Director Hernan could explain that a little bit more adequately than I can. One of the problems that Mr. Monahan brought forward was the 164 alarm activations that they experienced last year, and they accounted for 32% of all the emergency incidents last year. So, and 79 or almost 80% of those were not required to be monitored under the building fire code. So it's a bit of a problem. So I think what's happened a lot is, and again, if I'm not describing this adequately, I'm sure Director Hernan will, but people that have smoke detectors and so on and so forth, and even if they're hardwired, they do have a lifespan, and sometimes when they reach the end of their lifespan, the information, they activate and the information is sent to the appropriate the fire department or the monitoring companies that look after these, and so they have to be responded to, and quite often they're not necessary, as a matter of fact. As a matter of fact, they're just sort of like false alarms. So it's a bit of an educational program that requires, I think, more of us to be prudent about changing our batteries on time. And even if they're hardwired, they do have a lifespan apparently of about 10 years. And so they should be looked after as well. And one thing that I didn't mention in our last council meeting, but it was a report that we got from Director Hernan with regards to our storm sewer system. And there, I think, 3 phases of our storm sewers. And so they've been checked out, and at least phase 1 has been checked out. And Director Hernan was pleasantly surprised and pleased to report that about 85% of those storm sewers, the systems are actually in very good shape in the town. So that was a surprise because they thought maybe it might be just the opposite of that. 85% were in need of repairs or change. So that was sort of a good news story. But we still have a couple more phases to go with regards to those storm sewers being checked out. And that's about it. Thanks.
Okay. Any questions of Councillor Thompson? Councillor Emmer.
And not so much a question, Your Worship, just to let everybody know the RFP for the commercial use of the dock was not successful, so it'll be going back to the passive use for boats this summer. So be more docks or more boats docked at the dock.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Motion moved by Jonathan Weeb, seconded by Brian Thompson. Be it resolved, the Community Services Committee meeting minutes dated February the 28th, 2019, and the recommendations contained therein be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. Councillor Weeb, anything to highlight for us?
Not too much. We updated our concussion policy, the municipal concussion policy. We also ratified our mandate letter, our priorities list for the term. There was actually quite a bit of discussion around that. And Director Lamb updated us on some of the issues we were having with the roof at the Summit Center. And I don't know if, Director Lamb, you wanted any further update from that point to now, or if you would indulge us, Your Worship?
Sure. Through Your Worship, there's 2 issues related to the Canada Summit Center roof. One is over the Wellness Hub and the wall that connects to Motivations. The Wellness Hub has been displaced. They are currently serving customers out of a different location, as well as using some administrative space at the Canada Summit Center. Unfortunately, what's happened is we're waiting for Mother Nature to allow us to get all the remaining ice and snow off the roof before the final repairs can be made. So we're working with the tenants in that regard to ensure that they're taken care of and that they're able to continue to move forward. And the other roof is actually over the Jack Bionda rink, where we've had some leaking. We were able to do some snow removal and tarp off the area to get through the end of ice season. The ice in the Jack Bionda came out Monday morning last week. So now it's a point of, again, waiting for that ice to come off and reevaluate that part of the roof that may need to be crimped just to make some minor repairs to that roof. So staff continue to manage the situation on a daily basis.
Okay. That end your report as well, Councillor Weeb. Any questions? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. This car alarm is going crazy. I have a motion moved by Karen Terziano, seconded by Jonathan Weed. Be it resolved that the Corporate Services Committee meeting minutes dated February the 28th, 2019, and the recommendations contained therein be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. Deputy Mayor Terziano.
Thank you, Your Worship. It was a quick meeting, a few reports for information, 2 resolutions. One we passed to do a comprehensive draft delegation of authority bylaw, and one to add members of local boards to our code of conduct policy. And everything else was for information in there.
Okay, any questions? All those in favor? It's carried. Motion moved by Councillor Withey, seconded by Councillor Weed. Be it resolved that Council appoint Mayor Scott Aitchison to the Board of Directors of the newly established Municipal Accommodation Tax Tourism Entity for the 3-year pilot project term, and further Councillor Nancy Alcock be appointed as an alternate member, and further the town appointing bylaw be amended to reflect the appointments. Hello. Do you feel compelled to highlight something about this egregious appointment?
As always, try and keep it short and sweet, Your Worship. Just late last week, the only update to this would be just the BIA appointing Christine Kropp to be the BIA representative on the board, and subsequently Nate Smith to be her alternate. So.
Okay. Any questions about that? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, on to bylaws. I have a motion moved by Dion Schumacher, seconded by Jason Fitzgerald. Be it resolved, the following bylaws be received, numbered, and read a first time this 25th day of March 2019. That's bylaw 2019-25. That's a delegation of authority. Bylaw 2019-26, an amendment to appointing bylaw 2018-148. Bylaw 2019-27, Greece, part lot 13, concession 14, Brunel, that's 161 Town Line Road West, it's a rezoning. Bylaw 2019-28, Gris, part lot 13, concession 14, Brunel's 161 Town Line Road West, removal of the holding category. And then bylaw 2019-29, Lindgren, part lot 5, concession 13, Brunel, that's 301 Lindgren Road East, that's a rezoning. All those in favor of first reading? That's carried. I have a motion moved by Dion Schumacher, seconded by Jason Fitzgerald. Be it resolved the bylaws numbered 2019-25 to bylaw 2019-29 inclusive be reported and read a second and third time and finally passed this 25th day of March 2019. Questions? All those in favor? That's carried. We should note that Councillor Withey is leaving the table. Moved by Jason Fitzgerald, seconded by Dion Schumacher. Be it resolved the following bylaw be received, numbered, and read a first time this 25th day of March 2019. That's bylaw 2019-30. Hallmont Properties Corp., part lots 28, 29, 30, and 31. Concession 1, Chafee, that's 939 Highway 60, rezoning. And we should note Councillor Withey has declared a conflict of interest. All those in favor of first reading? That is carried. Motion moved by Jason Fitzgerald, seconded by Dion Schumacher. Be it resolved that bylaw 2019-30 be reported and read the second and third time and finally passed this 25th day of March 2019. And Councillor Withey has declared a conflict. Questions? All those in favor? That is carried. Councillor Withey can come back. Okay, we have council correspondence there from February the 19th to March the 19th, if you're interested in any of that. We have a District of Muskoka update, too. Not sure who would be interested in starting that. I'm looking at Councillor Thompson or Withey to start. Councillor Withey.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the district, I'm trying to think about the actual district meeting itself. The one thing I wanted to point out, which has me a little bit concerned, is it seems that MAST has come back to our table. You may have seen the press release where the Minister of Health was up to discuss with a group of people what this was all about. My concern that I voiced at our health committee table was that when I was director of the LIN, we had this come for approval to us, and it was resoundingly rejected. And I think because of some of the people in the city that were involved with it, that being Reuben Devlin and Steiny Brown, it's sort of circled back with the new government, which is fine. As a concept, you can agree with it or not. Our concern at the LIN was the price tag. And one of the things that certainly this new government has embarked on is collapsing expensive administrations, as evidenced by collapsing the LINs themselves, which saved approximately $9 million in the province. The issue we had at the LIN table when MAST came to us is they brought with them a budget of $1.2 million. So we saw that as a new administration. As I said before, you can believe in the concept or not. I personally have some issues with it, but in speaking to the committee, I just cautioned the committee that if we go too far down this road, are we that far away from them presenting the district with this $1.2 million budget? And the fact that there is only one taxpayer, and if the province says we like this, but we're not going to pay for it, beware, because it could be something that could be quickly downloaded to the district and to all of us. So, and I certainly would not be in agreement with that, the way I was not in agreement when it originally came before the LIN. There was no explanation for the $1.2 million, what it was going to be spent on, which is why it didn't pass at that level. So it's back, and I think we all need to be vigilant about how this is going to affect all of us potentially. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions about any of that for Councillor Withey? Okay. Stay tuned. There's lots of foot there. Councillor Thompson, would you like to update us on engineering and public works?
Indeed, I would. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Again, a lot of the meeting last week had to do with reports on municipal wastewater within the District of Muskoka, and the measurements that are used are actually the outflow, of course, from many of the wastewater treatment plants. And the only one that probably spiked, and even though it spiked, it still was within acceptable parameters according to the province of Ontario, was our very own Mount View wastewater treatment plant, and which is, I guess, another one of the reasons why it's being fast-tracked into being shut down and decommissioned and turned into a pumping station, which will hopefully happen all within the next couple of years. And as far as the water treatment plants themselves are concerned, they're all functioning well and doing the job that they're supposed to do here in Muskoka. One of the recommendations that came from Director Furman was, and this had to do with a branding idea with regards to our wastewater treatment plants and our water treatment plants, and have them renamed, and that the district water treatment plants and wastewater treatment plants be renamed drinking water plants and clean water plants, respectively. So we all thought that made pretty good sense, because that's exactly what the ultimate function of those plants happens to be, of course. And we know that when you measure the outflow or the outfall from, say, the Golden Pheasant wastewater treatment plant, the outflow is, the quality of the water is better than what you find in the lakes. It actually improves the quality of the water of the lakes, even though it's very marginally, because of course the volume of water that's coming out is respectively very tiny compared to the volume of water that's already there. So that was basically it. Again, a lengthy report too on the diversion programs here in Muskoka. And I guess the one that is most troubling for me is even though the Blue Box program diversion rate is fairly respectable, for what we do here in Muskoka, a lot of it, as it turns out, the products that we put in our blue boxes is not recycled because a lot of it is not clean. It's not cleaned properly. That is one of the problems. But the one I think that I find most disturbing is the fact that we don't have an adequate green bin program in Muskoka. And I think even in Huntsville, I think we have a very small area, and I think, Councillor Armour, you live in one of the areas where we have a green bin program. But if we could be diverting the compostables, it would extend the lifespan of our landfill sites incredibly, and also, of course, be much better for the environment all in all. So I think I'm going to take it upon myself to talk to Commissioner Hahn and just see what we can do to enhance the green bin program here in Muskoka, and particularly maybe even here in Huntsville, because we are the largest community, that kind of thing. So other than that, it was a pretty lengthy meeting, and I had to leave early because I had obligations back here before the meeting was over. So that's it, sir. Thank you.
Okay, any questions of Councillor Thompson? Councillor Weeb.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Thompson, do they have anywhere on the district site that people could find information as to how to compost on your own property? Like, is there a resource somewhere that people can learn?
Yes. I think there is that kind of information for sure. I think the challenge, of course, is I think we could all, when I lived in Victoria, everybody had a compost bin in the back corner of their yard, basically in the back corner of their yard. And they would go down to the ocean and bring back kelp and throw that on. It was all very good. And they had very beautiful lawns in Victoria, as I'm sure you all know. That's one of the problems we have here, of course, is especially for those of us who are in the rural area, what do we do, and what do we do in the wintertime type of thing. But there is information there for the taking, and how adequately we could utilize it here in this environment with what we have. I'm not sure. Ms. There.
Any other questions, Councillor Fitzgerald?
Yeah, just a follow-up to Councillor Thompson. At Development Services Committee meeting, we did have a deputation by Judy Blanchette, Muskoka's Eco Club, the Green Team, and staff's been directed to work with them and find more avenues for us to recycle more and compost and that kind of thing. And they actually work with event promoters and are trying to get off the ground.
I had through your worship, I had a meeting with Judith, I guess about 18 months or so ago about this particular program, and it's totally wonderful thing what they do. It's Judith, and she's organized a group, and they'll follow around, for instance, the Santa Claus parade and so on and so forth, and pick up any trash that happens to be left and so on and so forth. So they really are keen, and they do a great service for the community for sure. Yeah, to be commended.
Okay. Any other questions of Councillor Thompson? Okay. There was no corporate services committee, finance committee. There's really not enough on the agenda, so we cancel it. The district council meeting, we got an update on what's going on at Muskoka Futures. There are a couple of their current initiatives from David Brushy and actually a couple of minor alterations to the district official plan as well. There was a couple of errors that were made on the urban service boundaries. It appears as though there are more errors and some disagreement amongst folks, so there may be a small war to come on that one, but that remains to be seen. So that's still coming. I also spoke at the beginning of the meeting. Actually, it should be something we should acknowledge here as well. As I spoke briefly about Bill Calvert, who was the CIO for the District of Muskoka for just over 20 years. And of course, some will remember that Bill Calvert, upon his retirement from the district, actually came and served as the interim CIO here in Huntsville for about 8 months. I did speak about that time a little bit at District Council last week, and I think it's certainly worth noting that I think any of the staff who were here when Bill was here would, as I was chatting with a few people about Bill, many of the staff I spoke to all remembered him very fondly. That he sort of calmed a kind of a turbulent environment here and inspired staff to achieve great things, and reminded them of the value of public service and that it can be rewarding work. And so anyhow, I just thought it'd be important to mention that again, that Bill Calvert had passed away, and it was certainly a shock to everybody that he had a very brief illness, but it took him very quickly, unfortunately. So any questions about the district council meeting? Okay. We also have the update on the capital healthcare capital planning task force. Meeting number 27 really was a review of the information that went out in the public sessions. So there was not really a lot that I probably need to update folks on. We went through some of that costing, which of course is very preliminary, and some of the numbers are clearly quite shocking. So there's a lot of work to be done there. A lot of work to be done there yet. We reviewed that information prior to the public meetings, and so more work to be done there. I also wanted to make note of two other sad pieces of news that we obviously don't make it our habit of announcing every single Huntsvillian who has died, but we lost a couple of real characters in our community over the last few years, and I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware, of course, of someone who was a real fixture on our main street for a long time, but Eric Ruby passed away, and the family is planning more of a celebration of his life, I guess, on May 11th at 11 a.m. at the Hidden Valley Highlands Ski Club. There'll be a little reception and some lunch to follow there. And so I thought everyone should know about that. Anybody who's lived in Huntsville for any length of time will certainly remember Eric stepping out of the Ruby's menswear and carrying on, and it was very entertaining always. So a real character in our community that he'll be missed. And I think as well it's important to remember Audley Tredgett, who I think another character in our community that I think it's safe to say was a real treasure, and that I've said a few times now that I think that Audley was one of those, I think in many ways a symbol of what makes this community the special place that it is. That I still remember as a little kid hearing him on the radio station talking about birthdays with Councillor Thompson doing the news. And so that's a sad day as well to say goodbye to Audley. But I also wanted to make sure that the community was aware that there will be a service at the Salvation Army Citadel on Monday, April the 1st. That's this coming Monday at 1 p.m. So I'm sure that'll be standing room only to say goodbye to Audley. So I just wanted council to be aware of that as well. And that brings us to the close of our meeting. Anything that I missed that I should have brought up to the council? Okay, then we will bring this to a close. I have a motion moved by Dan Armour, seconded by Jason Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that confirmation bylaw 2019-31 be received, numbered and read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed this 25th day of March 2019. All those in favor? That's carried. I have a motion moved by Jason Fitzgerald, seconded by Dan Armour. Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 7:18 p.m. All those in favor? That's carried. Thanks, everyone.